Hey everyone, welcome back to Epic Tomorrows. I'm now talking to Yasmin Ullah, who's a Canadian Rohingya person studying at Kwantlen University in Vancouver. She's studying political science and sociology. Yasmin is a poet and a former president of the Rohingya Human Rights Network. Thank you so much for joining us
Thank you for
today.
having me.
So it's a great pleasure. As you know, I've been interviewing some Myanmarese people about the current situation over in Myanmar with the military coup. And I thought it was really important to get some perspective from a Rohingya person. And it's really a great privilege that you're someone who's quite prominent and obviously very knowledgeable. So I'm really pleased you agreed to do this. So in an article I read that you'd written a couple of years back, you speak of how when you were 3 years old, you fled Myanmar with your parents. You fled to escape the violence at the hands of the Myanmarese military or the Burmese military. I'm not sure which term you would use. I wonder if you could say some more about that situation. Maybe I guess it would be what your parents had told you about what happened. I'm not sure if you would actually have any memories, but yeah, I wonder if you could explain the situation of you leaving Myanmar.
Absolutely. So I definitely don't remember anything at 3 years old.
Yeah.
But what happened was my father was already was already supporting his family from the outside. He left for economic reasons for several years prior to us leaving, and he was already situated in Thailand. My mother was the person who pushed for it in 1995. Given the situation and the recurring violence that was perpetrated by the military junta, constantly, gripping the community with fear, and basically the community is becoming more and more disenfranchised in the 90s. So my mom, foreseeing that there will be less and less opportunity available for me, she decided that enough was enough. She was going to leave, and because my father was not able to travel into Rakhine State, the restrictions already started at that time in terms of accessibility as well as mobility rights. So my mother decided to board a military ship and joined my father in Yangon, but during her 3-day journey, she was with me, and because the military ship was the only vessel that was coming out of Rakhine State to Yangon, it was very daunting for her as some 20-year-old, and she was genuinely frightened by a lot of the military men who were on that ship. And it speaks to a lot of what Rohingya women have to go through in order to keep their family or keep themselves safe. So essentially, she was able to just get myself and her to the border of Thailand, and and we were able to unite as a family. But her hopes was that I would be able to at least gain some sort of access to education and to be able to become literate and read and write. And fortunately, I have been able to do that in both Thai language and English now. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, you're ahead of me because I can only speak English, shamefully.
Not hard to learn.
So, okay, well, that was fascinating, and yeah, obviously also quite traumatic. So how did, I mean, I hadn't written this one down, but so how did you then come to be in Canada and settle in Canada?
So a lot of our journey, a lot of our I think our entire existence in Thailand was about fleeing. And I remember moving around a lot, probably like moving to different schools all the time. And the reason was because the status of refugees are not recognized in Thailand, according to the International Convention, the UN, Refugee Convention. It was never ratified by Thailand. So us as a refugee don't really have a legal status within Thailand. So as a Burmese person who was not recognized in Myanmar, in our own homeland, we sort of have to, run around fleeing from the immigration police at all time. And I remember that my mom was being chased as we were moving. And, at some point when we live in a place long enough, they'd find us and then we would have to move to the next place. So that's been the theme. But essentially what happened was my father was very involved in activism in raising awareness around Rohingya issue. And he founded an organization called Burmese Rohingya Association of Thailand. And then he ran it for a few years, met a couple of Canadians who were, working as a missionary there. And they were profoundly touched by my father's story, and for the fact that my brother also has autism and he's nonverbal, and there isn't a lot of future or any sort of therapeutic therapeutic process or anything that's offered to him, not only because he's a refugee, but also like the advancement of technology or medicine there is just not far enough. So with all of that, the couple actually helped us and found us, a private sponsor who did a lot of work through, from here in Vancouver, and then helped us and, process things for us to be able to, be resettled here. There were a lot of, back and forth, but essentially we were able to come to Canada on June 24th, 2011. So about 10 years ago.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Okay. And is that organization that your father started, is that still going?
Sorry?
The organization that or the group that your father founded that you mentioned, is that still current? Is that still going? Or?
I think there's some sort of work ongoing. My father had sort of retired himself from the work because he's so far from the actual organization. But yeah, it's been sort of active for the past few years, but there's been some changes that happened.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So hundreds of thousands in Rakhine State, when you wrote at least the article in 2019, were still living in unbearable conditions. I don't know quite, of Rohingya people, I should say. I don't know quite what the situation is now. I know that in 2000 or from 2017 onwards, or you might be able to tell me it might be a bit different to the Wikipedia entry, but from 2017 at least onwards, there was a brutal genocide of Rohingya people, rape of Rohingya women, and since then a campaign of terror and starvation. Obviously, this persecution has been going on for decades. I wonder if you could maybe correct me. I might have downplayed or got dates slightly wrong, first of all, and also tell me, what's your perception of the origins of all of this persecution? Why did it all start, do you think? I know it's a big question, but
yeah. So what has been happening since 2017 is so a lot of what happened in 2017 was a really like a glaring example of genocidal acts, campaigns of violence, things that are extremely targeted towards Rohingya, and a lot of them have to do with sexual and gender-based violence, mass rape, and ensuring that women are actually near the site of slaughtering of their family members, in order for them to carve into their memory that this is ongoing, and their existence is to be questioned. So this is basically the gist of it. Now, people are currently still living under the same restrictions, limitations, condition in Rakhine State right now. The access to Rakhine State is still sealed from the outside world, apart from the current coup that sort of make things even worse, exacerbate the situation. Now, further than that whole idea of access, there's also issues of aid accessibility. There had been UN World Food Program that had been available for some short period of time to help people sort of rehabilitate themselves, but a lot of Rohingya people would not have access to them. Some would be able to access it, and then the military sort of took away the access to that and drove out the officers to halt the situation, so that they use that to leverage and put pressure on the community even more. They drove a wedge between Rakhine people and other ethnic communities that exist within Rakhine State against Myanmar. Against the Rohingya.
Yeah.
And so there is this huge rift between the two and many other communities. And that's been the tactic. Unfortunately, this is very much based in the colonial legacy, where divide and conquer have been used in order to disempower people. Now, the situation on the ground is still very limited. People right now, after the coup, strangely, the military had restored the internet in Rakhine State, where it had not been for the past 2 years. And access to education, access to basic needs are still extremely dire. There are, different sort of, rises in violence that would happen and perpetrated by the military. But at the same time, there is this armed group belonging to the Rakhine people called the Arakan Army. And whenever the military wants to actually target the Arakan Army, it also uses that opportunity to actually target the civilians as well, including Rohingya. And so we've seen many accounts of children being the target of bullets and heavy artillery, different sort of ammunition that they've been using. And really even more strange to that account is that the military somehow found a lot of wealth to purchase all of these, heavy artillery and weapons, not to use to defend the country or to protect its civilians, but to actually fight against their own people, using those weapons as a means of control. And that's literally it. What had happened to the Rohingya is basically an extreme example of where a military tightly controlled regime could lead to. And that's the destruction of a community that exists in a larger, more diverse and racially, the military had sort of destroyed that understanding of historicity between different understanding of different cultures. So because the country is so diverse and so so different from one area to another, what the military has been doing for the past few decades was, in order for the military to benefit the most, it has to first instill fear within each of each of these different communities by various tactics. Rape and sexual and gender-based violence have been used as a prominent tool in order to make sure that the community actually remains fearful and not allowed to go back to, you know, all of the areas that the crimes took place. Also, the use of heavy artillery, the use of weapons, the use of different violent tactics, extortion of money, basically making life hell on a day-to-day basis for people, for the ordinary people. On top of that, the biggest tactic of them all is dispossessing the land for accumulation. And that dispossession alone actually took away the connection that people have between their own understanding of their culture, their own identity, and that, you know, the sort of things that connect them to that land. Because the identity of the people in Myanmar are very, very connected, very rooted in the idea of the land, in the idea that they are the protector of the land. And this has been the use in order to strip people from their own understanding of their identity. And so, you know, through that, they land grab, they extract resources, and all of the money go back to line the pockets of the generals. So this is the root cause of all of it, is economic incentives. And the military's been getting richer and richer for the past few years. And the biggest budget that has been dedicated within, you know, the government's plan under the previous administration that's currently under siege and had been overthrown by the coup, is the military's defense budget. It actually triples for the past, you know, it tripled in the past 10 years. And on top of this military's budget, you know, you think that the budget this high and the budget that had been tripling would be matched with, you know, other departments, for example, health, and especially during COVID-19, for healthcare and education. No, healthcare and education had been basically put in the back burners, while people, you know, thousands of people are actually suffering from various different diseases. On top of this, they've contracted COVID and found it difficult to actually find any resources that comes from the government. So this has been the priority, to get themselves more and more, you know, wealthier and ensuring that they keep the control on the people, and ensuring that the communities and these different ethnic areas continue to be divided.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I've written down a lot, and I'll be doing some more research and probably like texting you some more questions another time. But
Absolutely.
yeah. So as for the coup itself, do you think? So I spoke to one non-Rohingya Myanmarese person, and they said that they thought that Min Aung Hlaing, if that's how you say it, that the reason that he instigated this coup is for very personal, selfish, trying to avoid being prosecuted for war crimes against the Rohingya, trying to avoid international prosecution, because apparently he was due to step down next year or something. Do you know if there's any truth to that?
So understanding that the military's institution is one that is extremely patriarchal and sexist, puts a different perspective into why General Min Aung Hlaing felt the need to exert his control over the entire country. This was not a planned coup. In how extremely scramble everything looks, and in the sort of tactics being used. Although the military's tactics are you know, thousands of years old, all of the things that we've seen being done to the people in Myanmar right now, to the protesters and people who demonstrate against the coup, are all the tactics that have already been used against the Rohingya people and people in ethnic areas. So often what the people, what we don't understand is sometimes the idea of the militaries being in control is more important than what their perception or reputation could be in the eyes of the international community. So Min Aung Hlaing really thought that he would be able to smooth things out with the international community by saying that, we're going to bring back the Rohingya and repatriate them, not calling us proper name. His office is still calling us Bengali, which is a derogatory term for us because we don't belong in Bangladesh. We actually, historically, we have been in Myanmar for the past thousands of years. And his military, his people had worked extremely hard to erase us off of the country, off of the historicity of the country, and all of the aspects that that link us to the larger Burmese culture. And so he wanted this as an opportunity to basically prove, not just to get away from the war crimes and crimes against humanity and genocide, but also he wants to prove his own competence. And there are very different tactics from governing a country according to democratic values versus governing the country according to what a military regime would look like. And he definitely did not get that sorted out well. And right now he's trying to exert his control as much as possible and really silence the dissenting voices in order for him to appear competent, so that there had been a lot of rumors and a lot of things that have been said through the grapevines that I've heard in the past few years of being an activist. And this is circulated within the circle of activists, that he wanted one day to become the president. He wanted one day to actually retire from his military service and actually go into politics. And I think that he found that this was an opportunity to overthrow the government and perhaps work to distort the perception of the international community into believing that he really could take the lead, and that he would ensure that the business side of things, the various different foreign investments and different foreign companies will still have their benefits looked after, so long as they still continue to work with the military. And this is what we are seeing today. I think that one of the silver linings that happened is Rohingya have been calling for this extreme sort of set of measures that are imposed in order to retaliate, in order to put more pressure onto the military's institution, including those business owned by the military. And we've always been told, because at that time the NLD or the de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi was leading the government, leading the civilian government, we've always been told that, well, give it time, even though a genocide already occurred and 600,000 people are at risk of being further persecuted. And no matter, the international community told us to be patient with the democratic transitioning process. But that's the thing. Democratic transition can only happen when the culture of impunity is completely eradicated. And the biggest institution that practices impunity is the military. And unfortunately, compromising with the military for the past 10 years have proven to have gotten nowhere, as we see today.
Yeah. So obviously, famously, Aung San Suu Kyi failed to condemn the military for their genocide in the International Court of Justice in, I think it was December 2019. I was going to ask you how you felt about that, but it's probably pretty obvious what the answer is. But I wonder if you wanted to say anything more about uh, the elections of 2020, because weren't the Rohingya excluded from those so-called democratic elections? And could you say more about the so-called reconciliation process, which I think you've just touched on? That do you think Aung San Suu Kyi is serious about wishing to sort of reconcile the country long term, or and even if she is serious about it, how could she possibly stand up to the military?
I don't think that it is in her power to push out the military.
No.
I don't think that the power, the ability to do that lies in any one politician's hands.
No, of course.
And right now, the revolution, which is what people on the ground would like to call it, and I very much believe in it, right, is needed. And I think that the culture of impunity that has started with the military's imposing its views and its agenda on the rest of the nation, has to be eradicated completely from all aspects of what this country has been operating on. And that is, through administration, various different government departments. They're all filled with military personnel or retired military personnel or people who have connection with the military personnel. There are also, security forces have been trained by various different different nation states, and they have misused those opportunities, those trainings, to actually hurt and harm their own people. And so you can see where the priority lies in the structure of the military and how it connects to the further, structure of the country. If those structures are not completely ripped apart,
yeah,
and gets rebuilt, it's going to be very difficult for us to walk away from the coup and not come right back here in a few years.
Sure.
Because those same powers are going to always be there. And unfortunately, without eradicating them properly or pushing them out of power and disempowering them, we would not be able to have, any remnants of democracy at all. And I think that Aung San Suu Kyi does not have that power. She probably understands that. And I don't know if going to the International Court of Justice, standing up to defend the military was her basically cry for help. But it definitely was very, very distasteful to sit on a different side from the not the military officials, but like the civilian government officials who were there. And I'm completely in a different aisle, having to almost fight in order to fight these urges and fight this narratives that are being put out just to exist. Really, Rohingya people have been doing all that we've been doing is just to emphasize the idea that we are also human.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know why it's so difficult, but it has been for the past few decades. So in order for Myanmar to move forward at all, the set of politicians that have been elected, the people who compromised with the military, knowing that the military will not abide by their rules, and that the 2008 constitution that was written by the military in order for the military to remain in power will not change. Those people, I don't think they belong in the political arena in Myanmar anymore. Yeah. And we see in the various protests that erupted around the country that it's probably time to hand over the baton to the younger generation. Yeah. I'm not trying to be ageist at all, but the kind of vision and the kind of commitment that those young people have are exemplary. And they are not here just to, just to have fun. They're not here to to stand for something that they don't believe in. They're here to actually make their voices heard, and they're willing to risk their lives for, the federal democracy, for a democracy that people are actually free and equal on all sides, from where, whichever part of the country, whichever ethnic groups. And they're reaching out to me. A lot of young people on Twitter from Myanmar are actually, apologizing. And I understand that, people can criticize it as an attempt to actually make amends so that the international community can view them in a better light. But I would like to be hopeful, because outside of Myanmar, I don't see any sort of resolution for Rohingya. There are over 1 million Rohingya outside in Bangladesh, in the refugee camps, in direly destitute conditions of living. There are, a few hundred thousands around the world. And there are 600,000 Rohingya now that are still inside Myanmar, waiting for any sort of improvement to happen inside the country and elsewhere. So we don't have any hopes outside of Myanmar. We don't have any hopes apart from actually encouraging the federal democracy to actually take place and be carried out in a proper fashion, where Rohingya are respected for who we are, a group of people that belong to Myanmar, a group of humans that deserve to exist.
That's great to hear that you're getting tweets from, yeah, some young people and apologizing and everything. And yeah, I mean, it seems to me that yeah, the motivation is just as likely to be that some of them are experiencing for the first time how brutal the military can be, and now they realize that that's how the Rohingya were treated, and if they're experiencing it for themselves. Yeah. So it's interesting to hear you talking about it as a potential revolution, and I know that some people are starting to talk like that, but I don't know quite how seriously to take that. But there seems to be this idea of things could be coming to a head. It's kind of like all or nothing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I just wanted to ask a bit more about. You've obviously got a very forgiving attitude, which is amazing. I mean, obviously you are in Canada, so maybe you can. It's more easy for you to sort of maintain sort of a good sort of overview of things. Um, but what do you think about the sort of brainwashing of the Myanmarese people against the Rohingya? Do you think that's been a tactic of the military, and is that one of the biggest things to overcome, that kind of brainwashing?
Yes. And not that racism did not exist prior to the military's control, but it existed in a more milder version. And because the country had exhausted its resources in order to gain independence from the British colonialist, after the exhaustion of that, and a brief moment of democracy in the country, it fell into the control of the military in 1962, and on and on and on to this day. So the military's had control of the state TV, newspaper. It had exerted control over religious institution, and then it actually even enacted and implemented some of the neoliberal ideals that alienate and vilify Muslims, people of Islamic faith, through Islamophobia, and frame it as war on terror, which is very, very common in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
And that has been extremely useful in inciting hate within the country and covering up the crimes against humanity and genocide that took place. And that's the easiest, I think, way to look at it. And the military is currently trying to continue to do that, but also try to, make amends with the international community, because the Rohingya case had garnered a lot of attention, and it had gone really, really farther than I could have ever imagined. And at the same time, appease the racist, nationalist, groups that are, small in numbers, but their influence really, really go far. And so what needs to happen is an actual painful, possibly very painful, reconciliation process. And unfortunately, with the coup in the way, we obviously cannot do that right away. The reason why I am trying to put on a very, very, a lot of tweets and a lot of message around power in unity, and actually speaking directly with people, young people from Myanmar, is because I know that this is merely a first step. And without making sure that we have a place at the table, even if there wasn't a seat for us, we make way, we sit on the table, we force ourselves in there somehow, by starting the conversation around, yes, Rohingya belong in Myanmar, and the years of propaganda that happened, that was tightly controlled and crafted by the military, had affected the people's understanding and the concept of who Rohingya is. But we can change that. Now that people have a glimpse of what it's like to live as a Rohingya in Myanmar, it's important for them to utilize that experience and understanding us a little bit further. And not just us, it's, it extends to other ethnic communities as well. In all of the experiences, there are so much similarities between us and the other ethnic communities. Now, in order to do that, there has to be this difficult discussion and conversation, and no conversation like this will ever be easy. Especially the reason why I'm saying that it's going to be painful is because it's going to require people who've gone along with the military's narratives to actually reflect back on their own doing and their own wrongdoings, possibly, and redeeming themselves in that manner. And that will take, the actual reconciliation process might take, a year or two, but the destroying the roots of hatred and racism within the system itself will probably take decades, because it took a few decades to make. It will take a few decades for people to unlearn those tendencies.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was a really fantastic assessment of things. Thank you so much. So yeah, thanks so much for teaching me. It's really interesting. You've moved my understanding forward a little bit of everything. So yeah,
Awesome.
and yeah, okay.
Alrighty. Thank you
See you.
so much.
No problem. See you later.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.